Good morning. Can I draw the meeting to order? Could I have apologies in order of business, please?
I've no apologies intimated, Chair. In terms of order of business, there has been one follow paper which is issued in respect of item number 11 on the agenda.
Apologies for Councillor Devine.
Okay. Item 3, declarations of interest. Okay. Item 4 is the minutes of the meeting for approval of the 4th of March, of the 5th of March, and again in the afternoon of the 5th of March. Any matters arising? Everybody happy with them? Happy to approve them? Thank you. Item 5 is an inspection of Tynewater Primary School nursery class.
Morning everyone, thanks Chair. I'd like to highlight to committee that this is a good report. I use my terminology carefully. Lots of positives in it. Pleased to see that the Care Inspectorate, and just to highlight that this, of all the reports today, this is the one that was done by the Care Inspectorate and not by Education Scotland. Care Inspectorate report highlights significant strengths, including the environment and the work of the staff team. Always very important to see that the needs of the children, and particularly those with additional support needs, are being well met. 2.5, though, I think it's clear there that we note that there is a new staff team there, and while the evaluations of good are always to be welcomed, we'll really set our standard higher than that, and we would be looking for the new staff team to build on the many strengths in the nursery, to embed and to take it forward from there. So I'd like to highlight to the committee that it's a good report, significant positives, well done to the staff team, but we do have an opportunity to drive on from what is a good report to drive the standards in the nursery even higher.
Questions? Jim?
Yeah, just to make a comment. I think, accepting what's been said, it is a good report. I'm just conscious of the fact that it may have been just an oversight at the time, but I think it's important that we actually do congratulate the school on the progress it's made. That doesn't seem to have been done in terms of the cabinet paper here. We're acknowledging the good work, but I think we need to be a wee bit more encouraging than maybe it's been on the cabinet paper. So, I think sending a wee bit of encouragement along to the school from here, looking for obviously improvement, but pleased that we've got goods.
I agree that we should it's always a difficult balance. I think that may have been an oversight on that. We would always, you're absolutely right, want to pick up on the positives. Schools have a big agenda nowadays, they have a lot to do, and we should be picking up every positive and congratulating them at the same time, driving forward. I agree.
Any other questions? Peter, I'm going to pose the devil's advocate question. Is do we genuinely see this as a good report? Take, for example, the last meeting, the inspection of St Mary's Primary School nursery class. There are 3 very goods and 1 good. Do we see 4 goods, which are just above satisfactory, as a good report, or do we see it as something that's acceptable, but we should be doing better?
Very good question. I think I started by saying that it's a good report. I do choose that word carefully. I think it is good, but we also acknowledge that both the Care Inspectorate and Education Scotland have a broad spectrum of evaluations, and you're absolutely right. That's not at the top of the spectrum. So I do think that if a national body says good and uses the terminology good, we should accept that it is good. But good, I think that the way I view it and the messages that we're giving out to schools, Chair, and to nurseries is that good is not really good enough. It's good if that's what they are saying it is, but we're really looking for very goods and excellence in all Midlothian organisations.
Good.
The point I'm making is that recognising the fact that it is a new staff team in the school. I know it's a new school, so for the point of view of the fabric and the environment, we would expect to be able to get good, I use that widely, good reports back. But I think in recognising that there is a new staff team in there, we'd want to give them as much encouragement as possible and key assistance to make the next report a better one.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, with that, can we agree with the report and the recommendations contained? Okay, thank you. Now move on to item 6, is the inspection of Lashwade High School Centre.
To draw the attention of colleagues to the fact that this is what used to be called a follow-through report by Education Scotland, the inspectorate wing thereof. In other words, as you know, there was a previous report, a standard report on the school. That report at the time contained positives, but there were clear messages that more could be done. So in January of this year, Education Scotland returned to Lashwade High School, and they did what we would call a follow-through. It's now called continuing engagement. I'd like to highlight to committee that Education Scotland were extremely positive. They don't use evaluations such as good and very good when they do this follow-through inspection. They report on the progress that's been made by the school. I think the key issues I would want to highlight is both in the report and in my discussions with Education Scotland, they were very impressed by the very real progress that's been made by this school in what is a relatively short period of time for a school to move forward. I'd like to highlight as well, as we're all very aware, that there was a lot going on in that period in the school. In other words, the closure of the old school and the opening of the new. That in itself is a massive challenge for a big school like Lashwade. So that was going on in the background, but nonetheless and undeterred, there very clear evidence of strong leadership in the school, with a new head teacher, of course. The staff really working together to push on with innovation and to make sure that that school really delivers on the capacity that it has and the tremendous potential that the head teacher is seeking to develop and deliver in the school. So inspectors very impressed by the progress of the school. Quite rightly, they want to be absolutely certain that the school is delivering everything it can do. So they've asked for a progress report in due course, which is a perfectly normal and acceptable part of the processes. So I would say to committee that this is an example of a school that in a short period of time has made real and significant progress.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Yeah, I would agree with you there, Peter. I think there has been some really good steps taken. I think the new school has been warmly welcomed. There's a buzz within the school part, but there's also a buzz within the whole building. I think, as I say, my favourite quotation is from one member of the public who wasn't quite keen on this was, it's like having a gala day every day when you're in the place, because you see folk you've no saw for years and years. It has become truly a massive community hub and exceptionally well used. The school itself, I think, when you walk round it, you just stand back and when you look at where technology and where learning has went to now, you just, when you get to my age, you're standing back there thinking, right, I need to go back to school just to start learning how to use this stuff. But I think Alan Williamson's new leadership has certainly paid dividends, and you can see great leaps forward. So congratulations. Any other comments? If no, we won't agree. Yeah.
Just, the statements you've made there, Derek, about the building and the excitement and all the rest of it, I think to be emphasised is the point that you made about the fact that in a transition period, irrespective of how good the building is, you can quite often fall back because of all the other things that are going on, yet we've moved forward, and that's a major achievement in these circumstances.
Okay, can we agree the recommendations? Okay, we move on to item 7, inspection of Pennycook High School.
Obviously, inspectors have been busy in Midlothian in the last wee while. They visited Pennycook High School in February of this year, I'll be careful in my terminology. This report lies somewhere between good and very good, I think, if we look at the 5 evaluations. Remember, this is an initial, this is a general inspection. This is the one that last week had prior to the one we've just discussed. Very pleased to see the word very in the evaluations. Particularly if you look at the areas that were in there. If we look at the 5 evaluations in 2.2, the first one's improvement in performance. That is the inspector's way of summarising what youngsters get out of school. And we can be too obsessed by processes and inputs. The bottom line is, I'm here, we're here to get these youngsters the best education, the passport to future success. This school is doing that through a very good means major strengths, and that's at a national level. Also, I'm delighted to highlight the fact that meeting learning needs is very good as well, because like every school, Pennycook High School will have a whole range of youngsters, from the most academic to the least academic, to those with significant health issues, to those with significant social, emotional issues. And to see that there are major strengths in meeting learning needs is very heartening. So, great to see the key strengths highlighted. I think I was quite taken by, unusually, that the inspectors highlighted the pride motto that the school has, and how well the school was delivering on that, the participation, respect, inclusion, determination and excellence. And I think that was very positive. On the other hand, good isn't good enough for Midlothian schools. We must be seeking more. And we know that there's more to do in the curriculum. We know that there's more to do in assessment. Yes, these are national issues that every school faces, but we've also got to deal with them specifically in the school. I'd like to highlight then to committee that this is a positive report with very positive features. I'd like to highlight too that the head teacher was off school at the time, just a couple of weeks beforehand, Mark Eady. I'd like to thank Mark for the work that he did and has done in the school in the lead up to it. I'd like to highlight that the senior managers, in particular Donny MacDonald, the deputy, stepped up to the mark very well in challenging circumstances. And I would highlight that I think this is testimony to the structures and the ethos of the school, the fact that the school has come out positively in challenging situations.
Thanks, John. Questions, comments? Adam, and then Joe.
Aye. Can I ask, I mean, it's a decent report, I'm not unhappy with it, but in terms of the curriculum getting a good, is that anything to do with the pupil numbers? Because there is an issue there that's been sort of rumbling along for a wee while. And I'm just wondering if that's anything to do with it. If it's no, well, you can always let me.
I wouldn't say it was specifically due to pupil numbers. We know it is, in secondary terms, a relatively small school. I think it's more to do with the fact that the school went down a certain line in terms of how it's developing its curriculum. I think even before the inspectors came along, the school had realised that there were things it could have done better, irrespective of the size of the school, and I think that was confirmed in the good discussions that they had with inspectors. So, no, I don't think it's primarily about that. I think it's an issue that can be dealt with irrespective of the numbers in the school. No, I think that even in a school of that size, I think that better decisions could have been made earlier on, and I think the school's much clearer now.
Joe?
Yeah, just to point out, this isn't a brand new hub by any means, and to use the very word, it's actually a very old school, 76 years old, and I would like us to pass on our congratulations to Mr Eady and his staff for the good work they do and getting their good report, very good report.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, I would tend to agree with Peter that if you look at the improvement in performance and meeting and learning needs, having 2 very goods in there is exactly what we should be excelling to, and I think we should be excelling to at the very least that word very good on every hand. And I think it's encouraging when you see that. If you look, Pennycook has came on some leaps and bounds, and we lie in the shadow of sort of Beaslack, which was seen as the near enough perfect schooling some years ago, where it had the fantastic results. It's not been easy, and I like yourself, take my hat off to Mark Eady and the work that he's done at that school, because he's brought it right up there amongst some of the better. So quite happy to agree with the recommendations. Members, okay? Peter, Brian.
No, just a general point, maybe on all these school reports. I've mentioned before, I would like information on school roles. I think this is when you're discussing any school or nursery or anything, to know what their capacity is, to know what the numbers that are and to know if there's any trends in the numbers going up or down. You know, so maybe even just a year ago or the last inspection, it was at kind of parameter kind of opening gambit when you start talking about an education establishment. I would like to see more of that just put generally into every report that's coming forward, so we've got a bit of background about the school before we debate the actual report on the school.
Fair point. You did raise that last time. I've spoken to Lorraine, who puts the reports together, and in future we'll make sure that there's a relevant background section that gives just kind of raw data and trends, so that members are aware of the direction of the school.
Okay, with that, can we agree to the recommendations? Thank you. We want to item 8, inspection of learning community surrounding Pennycook High School.
This report isn't good enough in terms of what it's saying, of what's being delivered in this area. If I could just explain, first of all, just to be absolutely clear what we're talking about. This is not directly related as such to the Pennycook High School report. The two, in a sense, stand separately. Pennycook High School is about what the Education Service, Mark Eady and myself do within that school. This report, the way that Education Scotland now organise their reports is, when they do an inspection in a non-denominational high school, simultaneously they do an inspection of what community learning and development do in the catchment area, the work they do in the catchment area of that school. So the two go hand in hand. There is some overlap, obviously, because CLD would work within the school and do a bit of work in the school, but essentially they're two quite separate beasts. So what we're talking about here then is not related to the school, but is about what community learning and development do to provide the skills, the activities that are required for the Pennycook area, or at least that part of the Pennycook area. The evaluations, there are 4 evaluations, as you can see here. 2 of them are good and 2 of them are weak. None of us, and I'm at the forefront of that, want to see the word weak in any report on any Midlothian school or service. And clearly it's something that we're taking extremely seriously. The 2 week evaluations are in areas of improvement in performance, in other words, the delivery of the service. Clearly that's not good enough, and on how the service goes about improving itself. Clearly we need to be more ambitious and aspirational in what we're looking for. I have no desire for any repeat of this in any other reports that we're likely to get. We're taking immediate steps to work with Education Scotland to unpick why they believe, and we accept, that these evaluations of weak are the right ones. We've got putting together an action plan, because we don't need to learn about this simply for Pennycook, but we need to take the lessons of Pennycook and apply them to other CLD provision. So this report is demanding priority attention, and we need to look at what we can learn from this and apply it to other parts of the service, so that we ensure that the next report we have in CLD is a much more positive one and reflects what we're trying to do for some of the most vulnerable citizens in Midlothian.
Peter, thank you. Questions? Gentleman Brown.
Yeah, particularly, Peter, when you mentioned when we were talking about improvements in performance, your definition of what the youngsters got out of the school as being one of the most important things. It's, it's not about actual delivery, it's about what difference they make to the future of the people that they're working for, and for, you know, the benefits of the people they're working for. So it's particularly disappointing that we get a week under improvements in performance. The point you made just to the tail end there about, you know, the wider community learning and development delivery, if you like, I'd be interested in if it's possible to give any examples that were cited in regards to the justification of why we got a weak report here, and how widespread do we consider these issues to be? Is it a bigger issue than just in terms of what's going on in that particular area, nothing to do with, as you say, with the high school itself? And I suppose, you know, when was the last inspection report on a community area? I presume that if we've had an initial inspection for Last Wade, that at that time the community learning and development was reviewed there as well. I can't recall what the outcomes in that area were. Is it something we need to be concerned about, the way that community learning and development are delivering their service?
Yeah, the last one would have been the Last Wade report, which came out quite positively. And that in itself is reasonably heartening, because it would suggest that it's not completely systemic, the issues that we face here. As to why we've ended up with these weeks, clearly we're now trying to unpick that. What I've learned is that one of the main issues appears to be a lack of joint planning among the key stakeholders in the area. So while people might be doing very worthy work in individual bits, and I know you'll know, but just to be absolutely clear, community learning and development is not an entity in itself. It's made up of lots of different well-intentioned, hard-working, committed people who clearly, in this instance, in the view of inspectors, have not been working closely enough and coherently enough together. So, one, we need to look at the whole joint planning process. Two, we need to bring people even more closely together, I would argue, in terms of our three priorities of the single Midlothian plan. Three, I think we really need to be clear about what CLD is all about and what it's trying to achieve, because clearly somehow or other it isn't doing that. And I think also there are new regulations nationally for CLD, which will be based around joint planning, where everyone who contributes to CLD will be invited and asked to plan together. So I think there are a number of things there that A, help to explain the result that we've got here, which isn't a good one, and B, there are also things that we can build on to start to address the issues that have arisen here.
The emphasis in 2.3 on volunteers, maybe I'm just reading a wee bit wrongly on this one, but on the fourth bullet point, community organisation and volunteers delivering service and building social capital. Right, I mean that can happen anywhere. You know, with good volunteers and good community work, and the number of volunteers that's involved in various different projects, they only see it as their project. You know, they don't see it as part of a plan. They don't see it as part of a big picture. You know, surely the only thing that we're scoring here is CLD. Who can bring these things together and formulate neighbourhood plans and community planning activity and bringing the joint up stuff. So even in the first bullet point, I mean, if I corrected that to read CLD programmes delivered by staff and supported by volunteers, rather than delivered by staff and volunteers. You know, I'm thinking about where am I putting a comma in there, you know, if that's for this kind of emphasis, because, you know, there's that many good, you know, community volunteers, given, you say, the hard work and the dedication, but they didn't see them part of a scoring or an inspection kind of criteria. So how can we put them in this report with such a high emphasis on it?
I think what that highlights is the fact that when we're dealing with CLD, it's a very different entity from dealing with schools. We have our own community learning and development service here, but I think it's worth highlighting, and I think you're doing that, that's not the only thing that's being inspected here. Yes, our own service is, and I'm not dodging that one. That's something that our service has to take on the chin, and we'll take on the chin and move forward with. We'll have to deal with that. but also because of the nature of CLD, the Education Scotland does look at all of the activity that goes on in an area. Now, you can see clearly that has immediate implications for how people work together, for cohesion, for planning, and it looks to me, as we unpick how we've got into this position, that that's the key. I would not want in any way to disparage the work that people are doing in this area. Clearly, they're doing great work, but something's missing when it comes to channeling it, to focusing it, and to making a difference for the people that it's supposed to make a difference for. So it is a complex area. It does involve lots of different people with different status, paid employees, volunteers, but that makes the challenge all the greater, and that also makes the rewards all the greater when you get it right.
Thank you, Derek. So leading on from that, it's a really good question. How much of the work that CLD does is statutory requirement by the Council, and how much is discretionary? I'm really asking this because the reference has been made by Brian to the number of volunteers involved.
You probably realise that the CLD is relatively new to my domain in terms of it was in the last few months at CLD. So I'm busily working with Anne McConaughey and others to try to just unpick that. I think the broader answer I would give to that is that Anne McConaughey and all of us are really, really clear that what we need to do is to focus that work along the lines of the implications of what you're saying, so that we're really clear on what it is that CLD is there to do, what it can and what it can't do in the current position, where it's able to make a difference, where it's not able to make a difference, where it's the job of CLD to do it, CLD should do it, where it's the job of volunteers and other people in the community to do it, then we need to come to an agreement so that we're really, really clear on who's doing what. So that's something that we're unpicking, and that clearly, in the light of this report, needs to be done so urgently.
Thanks, Derek. Sorry to come back on this. It's still not clear to me. My question was how much of the work is statutory requirement. If we find that most or all is discretionary, my concern then is that the Council is perhaps not giving it the focus that it perhaps should.
What I'm trying to say is that I'm in the process of working that out, and I agree with you. We really need to make sure that CLD, I need to unpick that to be really clear on the balance in terms of the question you're asking, and to make sure that CLD is doing absolutely the right things, and that the money we're investing in this is spent in the right areas. So that's something that I can pursue and I can get back to you.
Okay. Adam, did you?
Thanks. I mean, it's a wee bit disappointing report, but you're right, there is a lot of good work goes on. But in point 3 with the conclusion, the further visit will be made within a year of the report being published. Will you come back to us with an interim report before that, so that we can see that there's progress being made, obviously, if there's an action plan actually going to be put in place?
I think it's absolutely right when we get a report like this that elected members and all those who have an interest in it should know exactly what we are doing. And so we should be putting together an action plan. We should have a confidence working with Education Scotland that we're doing the right things. And I would be confident that we would have something to bring back to members that would give a real clarity about how and where we're going to make a difference.
Okay, any other questions or comments? The one thing, Peter, I would probably say, I see the recommendations that were on the Cabinet paper. Recommendation 5 was to instruct the Director of Education to ensure that a service improvement plan incorporating the recommendations of the inspection team be brought forward. I would have thought that would have just been a matter of course. Where are we with this improvement plan? I mean, this report was done in February, and I would have thought very quickly after it, and we would have feedback for the inspection team. You know, I would have liked to start seeing, when we're getting these reports, what we're actually doing to resolve the matters. Not being dealt well, there's an inspection report, and we're going to develop an improvement plan. I would have thought very quickly, and especially in education, 3 months is a long time for a child and for a service. I would have expected to see an improvement plan along with these now.
Absolutely right. We're drafting that. The slight hold-up for us, Chair, has been that we've asked twice for a meeting with Education Scotland person on it. They've said that they're delighted to do that. They've been, I think because of holidays and so on, they've been unable to do it. So we're already starting to draft that, but it would be wrong, I think. I don't want to launch into a plan until I've sat down and spoken to Education Scotland to hear precisely what the nature of what they see as the issues are that lie behind these week evaluations. So we emailed them again last week, and we're hoping that that meeting will take place very soon. As soon as the meeting's taking place, we can put the bits of the jigsaw together, and that plan will be available.
Okay, it probably takes me then to the fact that if what we're saying here is 3 months down the line, but we can't get a meeting with education, or the Education Inspectorate, should we not be planning that right at the start of these inspections so as that we have time slots slotted in? Whereas if there are any weak or less than satisfactory reports, that we already have time lines slotted in along with the Inspectorate to sort of see, because we do have the initial feedback stuff before the report comes out. We've then got that time. I wouldn't have thought it should take very long after that to actually have the basis of an improvement plan in front of us. So I would have thought, and if we're talking about working in partnership properly, that we could have something already in place prior to going, or that there should be a format there where we're guaranteed that we can get back to these meetings in a short period of time, and no we'll be having to wait for February till now before we start looking at an improvement plan.
Now, just to be clear, what I'm saying is I agree with you that Education Scotland, it would be good if we could slot these meetings in. I guess their resources are stretched as well. But just to reiterate that Anne McConaughey and myself are working. You're absolutely right. We do have the feedback from Education Scotland that took place as part of the inspection. We are working on that. All we're really keen to do is I don't want to formalise anything until I have heard personally from Education Scotland, so that I don't set us off down a road that isn't the right one for us.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Could we agree with the report and recommendations, and could I ask that the improvement report be circulated to members once it's available? Okay. Thank you. Move on to item 9, which is a follow-through evaluation of education psychological services. And I'll be Peter again.
It is indeed. This report goes back, or at least the history traces back to June 2010, which is nearly 4 years ago. Midlothian Council Educational Psychology Services was inspected for the first time in this context then. That report was not a good one. Inspectors came back in September of 2011, again in April of 2013, and most recently in February of this year. I'm very pleased to say that, again, this is a follow-through inspection, so we don't use specific evaluations in this, but it's very positive to see that this is an inspection where we can clearly demonstrate evidence of significant progress. I would draw committee's attention to 2.2, which identifies key strengths, which I think are very significant, and I'll just spend a little bit of time on them. The inspectors made clear that we now in Midlothian have a greater ambition for our children and young people. They made clear that we have a clearer vision for education in Midlothian. They highlighted the strong leadership, and I would entirely agree, of the Principal Educational Psychologist, Sarah Philp. They highlighted the pace at which improvements in the service are taking place. They pointed out the coherence amongst the team, which wasn't always evident. And very importantly as well, I think the last bullet point in 2.2, they pointed to much closer alignment between the psychological services, the work of the Council, and, of course, what we're doing more broadly in education. So I think there are real and significant strengths being highlighted. I also think it took far too long to get to that stage because, as I say, this all started in 2010, but it's great to see it there. They were also clear that there were things that we had still to do, which we fully accept. There are things that in any service we need to keep working on. But overall, I'd like to highlight to committee that this is an example of significant change in a fairly short period of time, because the principal educational psychologist hasn't been in post that long. I think the success is based on real principles, and I would point out that clearly I can see the fact that since we have different services within my remit as Head of Education, I think we can apply many of the successes and the ingredients of success here to other areas, including CLD. And it's things like the quality of leadership that was highlighted, the vision, and the fact that the individual service has a key part to play in council priorities and works very closely with the broader education service. I'd like to highlight the skills and talents of the principal educational psychologist and what she's achieving. And in fact, just to reinforce once again that this is an area that deals with very vulnerable children and families, and this is an area where we should be doing very, very well. So I think what we need to do as a service is embrace and harness the talents that are evident here, the successes we've got here, and make sure that we apply them to other services, parts of the service, including CLD.
Questions? Comments? None? Can we agree with the recommendations then? Okay. Item 10 is a street sweeping review, and that will be Phil, is it? Or John? John.
Thanks, Chair. Alan, introducing you quite rightly say the co-author of the report, Phil's in attendance. Committee will recall that this report follows a special meeting held in the autumn and provides updates for committee on street sweeping and the provision of litter and dog bins throughout the council area. In section 2 of the report, we've outlined the legislative background which requires the council to comply with the litter code of practice. Also in the same sections are provided details of the resources currently available in terms of labour and vehicles deployed on street sweeping, and appendices to the report provide details of the bin locations for both litter bins and dog bins. Committee in the autumn asked us to look at proposed service changes, and these are set out in sections 3, 4, 5 and 6 of today's papers. And with your indulgence, Chair, rather than go through each individual proposal, I would suggest that if there are any clarifications that members or yourself may have, we can deal with them in open session, and both myself and Phil will try and endeavour to clarify any points. Finally, in terms of the recommendations, it's incumbent for me to point out that if there's any resources recommended by the Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee, that would require to be reported in due course to Cabinet. At that stage, Chair, I'll pause, and if there's any members or points members wish to have Phil or myself, I'll endeavour to respond. Thank you.
Okay. Questions, Brian?
I maybe mentioned this one before directly to yourself, John, but when you've got a rural community and you've got a waste bin in that community, it just seems duplicating service when two different vehicles are going, practically on the same day in some instances. One's going there to do the street sweeping or collect the wheelie bins, and the other one's going there to attend to the street litter bin. And the common sense kind of scenario I'm proposing would be if the bins could get emptied at the same time. It wouldn't take that much to take a bag out of a bucket and put it into one of the grey bins as it's getting emptied into the vehicle, because it's all, as I believe, is all a landfill anyway. And to replace the bag, just involve maybe the street sweeping vehicle to carry some bags to do that. I think it would make economic sense to do that, particularly for the rural kind of communities, to do it at the same time. And the purpose of dog fill bins, it defeats its purpose when they're full. When it's overflowing, and the person comes to empty it and doesn't take away the overflow, the rubbish that's actually lying on the ground round about. So, you know, and then it's another call out to come back for the overflow stuff, or a different operative is doing the ground pickups from there. And I can't see the sense of that either. You know, surely that should all get done at the same time. And I just wonder if you could maybe expand a wee bit more on that sort of joint up approach.
Yeah, I'll take that. Both the services are distinct, the refuse collection and the street sweeping. Refuse collection, for our staff, we use software to allocate the routes and the timings so that the uplift to the bins are, are appropriate for the staff to undertake. Street sweeping is totally different from refuse collection entirely, in the way we look at the code of practice, the way the duty we have to undertake. I understand what you're saying, Brian, but it's very, very difficult to try and align both together because of the timings that we put on our staff to actually reduce the collections of the bins for them empty litter bins has a knock-on effect and more costly effect for possibly an additional refuse vehicle coming later back into it. It doesn't work, but I do understand what you're saying there. The dog bins in the overflow, we have recently changed our staff who are actually undertaking that, and as far as I'm aware, that's now all being uplifted as we empty the bin, as we cleanse the bin, and we clean up the area now.
Okay. Other questions or comments, Adam?
Aye. One of the things I've kind of noticed recently is there used to be, when it was lunch times, the two high schools in particular, the number of people from Beeslack go up to Tesco's and the sort of set of shops that are there, the chip shops sometimes open as well, I think. And Penicuik High School tend to go down to the town precinct, and Greg's especially. Certainly there's quite a lot of litter gets dropped during that period. There used to be a street orderly would come up just after that. Is that still happening? Because it doesn't seem to be, because the bags seem to be lying for forever. If it's dropped, I mean, I'm being stupid, but if it's dry when they're dropped and it's windy, they blow all over the place. And if it's wet, they tend to stick to the pavement. And I mean, it's really quite unsightly. And you can have 50, 60 bags, really, between Greg's and, quite a short space, it's quite a short distance. Is that street orderly still coming? Because I've maybe missed it. It's maybe they're doing it to me like that.
No, we currently don't have a street orderly there, but in the new proposals we are going to reintroduce it again. It was one of the things that we identified as an issue.
Wonder as well, as a follow-up, I mean, is there any moves that's maybe been done to go out to actually speak to the two schools to try and, maybe get the youngsters just to use the bins? Because there's bins there. I mean, it's not as if there aren't any there. And that, to me, would be the solution. I mean, because there's a cost, obviously, in putting a street orderly on to come and pick the stuff up that they shouldn't need to do, because it is basically the lunchtime drop that's causing the problem.
Yeah, we have attended the school on a number of occasions to try and encourage the staff to speak to the students to use the bins that we are providing, and we do follow that up quite regularly. Yes, it will be.
Okay, Jim.
Yeah, Chair, I've got a couple of questions. One is a kind of general thing that struck me about the street sweeping vehicles that go around doing the gutters. Have we ever done a sort of analysis of the effectiveness of these in terms of parked vehicles? Because it's more and more the case that, if you see it coming past my door, the parked vehicles there, so there's whole sections of the corner of the street not actually being done. Have we ever actually, for instance, counted the number of parked vehicles that's gone past on the course of its route to determine what percentage of the actual route is actually being effectively swept and not just moving it in the middle of the road? That's one sort of almost like an aside. But on this issue of additional bins being a possibility here under what you've been planning, and the criteria for placing the bins, it's good to have a scientific method of determining the appropriate locations for the bins, and you're doing that on the basis of how close they are to existing bins, proximity to facilities and stuff like that. I'm a wee bit concerned that some of the criteria in terms of the number of requests that have been made, or to some extent the source of the requests, like MPs, MSPs, councillors, and also, you know, complaints, I suppose, coming from the community. Is there no danger with the kind of points that have been awarded for that, that it's going to be controlled by the folk that can shout the loudest rather than actual need? That would be my concern, particularly when it comes to the bit about the councillors, MPs, MSPs, etc., where we're talking about 10 points. And there's two ways to read what you've got there. And you know, is it 10 points for each of these people that contact? If the MP, the MSP and the 3 ward councillors, is that 50 points right away, for instance?
Yeah, I think you're correct in the way you're looking at that. We didn't have a criteria before. Litter bins and dog bins just went up, probably for whoever shouted the loudest previously, and that's how it was done. What we try to do is put a criteria down that will work, that we review, as well as councillors and MSPs will review it. And one of the things that we had thought about is that, yeah, that's the criteria at the moment, but let's have a look over the next year how that actually works in principle. Because I think we need to be clearer. This is our first stab at putting a proper criteria in. I'm not saying that we've got it 100% right. It might not be, or it might be. But let's actually have that criteria. Let's go with it. Because at the end of the day, you also notice that the service does have a say as well in where the bins go to. It's not just automatically given. So I would suggest that we go with it and we review that and we look at it over the next year.
Ian?
Thanks, Terry. I share many of the concerns that Jim mentioned there, particularly about people applying pressure because they know how to, and we've seen that before in other respects. But I'd like to ask more about the dog bins. Now, I'd heard anecdotally that we were no longer supplying dog bins, but we were going to use the general bins in future. Now, I may have picked that up wrongly. It could be that people were being told they can use the general waste. If you could maybe, first of all, confirm whether that's true or not, that we are continuing to provide them. But my more general question really is, as regards the point system for dog bins, it doesn't seem to work quite so well. People don't walk the dogs within 50 yards of a bus stop, for instance. They walk along cycleways, walkways, places where it's perhaps not so easy for the council to remove the waste, but the impact of people just leaving them, or as they tend to do, pick them up, put them in a plastic bag and then toss them up into the nearest tree. I don't know why they do that, but that's what tends to happen in areas where it's more out of the way, and so we get fewer points, but people do tend to walk the dogs.
First of all, the dog bins and litter bins have always been dual purpose. In this council, the dog poo can go in either bin. That's still continuing, and I believe our colleagues in Environmental Health are actually promoting that at the present time. Dog bins within walkways, it gives the staff the problems of going along and uplifting the bins, and that's why we suggested it's at the start of the walkway rather than actually along the walkway itself.
Just if I could come back on a couple of things. What was talking about the point system that you've got, I think, you know, it's worth us discussing it openly here, because there could be a case that there are tweaks that could be made. I'm quite happy with the number of requests, making recognition and giving points for the number of requests for delittering a particular area, because I know that where we used to be proactive, we've moved to be reactive in quite a lot of areas, and therefore if we're continually being asked to come to clean a particular area up, then it does kind of suggest that that might be somewhere where we would want to put a bin. So I'm quite happy with the points for that. But again, the number of requests for a bin, you could get a group of people in an area that is, again, as I was saying earlier on, know what they're doing and coming in and using up the resources perhaps inappropriately. I know that you're saying that you've got I suppose, the ultimate veto on it, if you like, but there's no point in having a system like this and then ignoring it. So you've got to have to take into account these points. And the other thing was, I'd asked the question about the sweeping vehicle. I just wondered if that, about whether we had done any kind of studies into how effective they were.
The small sweeping vehicle, no, we haven't counted how many cars are parked when the sweeping vehicle goes round. However, if it was that dirty, it would be reported back to the supervisor, who would then organise someone to come back at a later date to sweep that area. You've got to remember that the street sweeping vehicles were brought in after we reduced the staffing numbers for increased productivity. We haven't generally had many complaints after the street sweeping vehicles been along the street, but to answer your question originally, no, we haven't counted the number of cars, and it's maybe something we should look at and see if there's any issues that we have with that. The weightings, quite happy to have another look at the weightings and review and make it a wee bit lighter. Don't have a problem in revisiting that and coming back and letting you have a look at it.
Adam.
Thanks for letting us back in. Can I ask, in terms of the fixed penalty notices, how many of them are actually been issued? Because, well, if you see dogs that lying about, folk will say, is anybody getting charged, or what are we doing about this? And unfortunately, for the dog's point of view, it's not the dog's fault, it's the owner's fault. I mean, there's no any question of that. I just wondered if there's been any fixed penalty notices, because it is an issue. I mean, I've got a dog, and I take them up Flotterstone most of the time, and I've got to say, for the amount of animals that go up there, there's hardly any dogs that line at all, and there's no dog bins at all. Folk actually just pick it up. So, I mean, if it can be done in one bit, I'm not saying it's the council's responsibility, but I mean, owners should actually be picking it up anyway. And I don't know if fixed penalties would actually maybe encourage folk to do that. They should be doing it as a matter of course anyway. But as I say, there's about a 6-mile walk you can do up to the second reservoir, that not a dog bin at all, and there's no dogs. I mean, any dogs there that's lying is negligible for the amount of animals that got up there. I just wondered if the fixed penalty notices might be a way of dealing with it, or if maybe more proactive.
In terms of fixed penalty notices, much as it's no longer my remit for environmental health, so I don't have the precise figures, and we can give those to you at a later date. Certainly I'm aware, year on year from 2010, we have had an increase in the number of fixed penalty notices that have been issued across the county, which corresponds with the additional work that we're doing in terms of surveillance. There was covert as well as overt surveillance that was carried out over the past 2 years under the terms of RIPSA. There has been, since last November, a new Green Dog Walker scheme that was launched, which is in a co-production process where there's peer pressure in terms of interested groups, and we've had a lot of sign-up from that in terms of the dog training clubs in the area, vet practices, and people who've got particular interests. So we could bring that information back to you, because, as I say, I don't have the currency of the current stats for that service at present.
Follow up with that. What is the procedure for somebody reporting somebody that's actually dogfouling, continually dogfouling? Because there are a couple of bits. I mean, do you need a witness? Or do you need 2 people to do it? I mean, because that was one of the issues. And obviously as well, folk don't want to follow their neighbours and things like that as well. But I mean, what is the procedure for reporting it?
Yeah, we encourage, both through the new scheme and previously, that people report that in to us. As you say, it's intelligence-based, so that, one, we can have staff in that area, and also give that a particular focus, whether it's around schools or parks, that we've got staff in the area. If there are staff, then 1 officer is sufficient. If it's members of the public, then it's 2 in terms of getting that verification. And 1 member of staff is sufficient for issuing a fixed penalty notice. The police have also got that authority in terms of a fixed penalty notice.
Brian.
On the dog bins, you've answered some of the questions, but just a sort of positive point. The number of times I've had to contact you for an increased frequency to empty the bins, or for a larger bin, for that thing. I think that shows that more people are now picking up. And when you put in your figures that the number of new bins, it's not just the new bins, it's about the increased frequency of collections and about the need to maybe for a larger bin in places as well. So I think that should be taken into the considerations of the report. And it is, and again, I would put a more positive line on that. It's no greeting about it. It's actually responding to the need of what people are now doing. So there is, I'm seeing there is a bit of change of habits. And yes, more should be done to support the Green Dog Walkers scheme and more publicity for that. But I'm dealing with that from other avenues. And the other kind of constituent problem is people doing extensions in their houses, and when the sand runs down the side of the street and it blocks up the gullies, and that getting responded to. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the first time they chap the door, the person that's done that, is a warning system. Has there ever been any further action on that, on penalty action for anybody that has maybe blocked a gully on shall we say, more than one occasion?
Blocking gullies normally come under our colleagues' transportation. I haven't, in the service, knocked on anyone's doors and asked them what they're doing. I'm not aware of anyone actually following that through. I can't answer that, Brian, sorry. Yeah.
Brian, go and put your mic on when you're speaking, please.
Just the one I have reported previously, on a couple of occasions, it went to Ricky Moffat, for reporting, and that's where my information is coming from. I'm just wondering if it was any impact on your service at all, when you're actually spotting filled gullies on your travels. And just if you would just confirm to me that the positive points of increased bins, frequency usage and size of them, requests is actually a positive, and you've maybe confirmed that you've noticed a trend, and more need for this service.
The frequency and the emptying of the litter bins generally are very good. We don't have a lot of issues. Some of the constituents who may come to yourselves will maybe say that dog bin hasn't been emptied. However, when we actually check it, because it is emptied twice a week, for some reason the public, if there's a bag just lying out the bin itself, automatically think it's full and they throw it down at the side. When you actually go, the bin is still empty. We are being, as I said earlier, far more proactive on the dog bins and the clearing up of the dog bins, and I've certainly seen a reduction in any complaints that's come through.
Okay. Ian?
Yeah, thanks, Derek. Going back to the approach for new bins, I very much feel that going for a points-based system is probably the best way to do it. Whether we go for a more scientific approach, whereby somebody gets 40 points and fails, somebody gets 41 and doesn't. On the other hand, if you don't do that, it's open to manipulation. But just a few points which maybe, I don't know what the answer is to each of them, but it might be worth you taking away and thinking about. One is with the situation that Jim was talking about, where councillors are approached and that adds 10 points. Looking at the way this stands, that suggests that we would probably then say to the people, well, I'll put in a request, but you put one in yourself and get all your friends to as well, which means people will be thinking, well, what the hell's a councillor for? I thought they were supposed to do this kind of thing. So there are things like that that we'd have to make sure we could contain. You mentioned before about the walkways. I appreciate what you're saying about access to them. I also request that you don't just look at the end points of the walkways, but also where vehicles can get close to them. Things I'm thinking like, for instance, the walkway in Bonnyrigg, where Skelty-Muir Avenue goes right close. And I know you've got a dog bin at the end of that, but people might not see it if they're on the walkway, for instance. So we have the bins on the walkway, but with access points which are relatively close, rather than keeping the bins just off the walkway because they're next to the road. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, I mean, I want to echo the fact that I just didn't think that there should be any points at all for a councillor, MP or MSP phoning the public can phone. I just actually think what it'll lead to is everybody telling each other, the mere councillors you can get to moan or complain for you. I think these bins should be put in the places they're needed most. One of the things that when you look through this, and this is probably the main question, is when we're talking about this, are we still in the silo mentality, Phil, where you're picking up some bins and landscaping are picking up the other ones, and we've got two different criteria for getting them? Or are you taking over all waste bins, including in parts? Because at this moment in time, I didn't understand you do walkways. I think you do the started walkways, but you didn't actually do the walkways. You do the entrance to a park, but you didn't actually do the inside of a park. Are we still talking about being in that silo mentality?
Within the report, there is no suggestion of crossing over to land services and their responsibility. It wasn't in the remit to look at where land services have got their own staff, their own outcomes to do. I'm quite happy to go away and review if you feel, Derek, that it's better that we start looking at doing other work that's done elsewhere, i.e. land services.
Well, maybe ask the Chief Executive to comment. I thought the whole idea of the Council and our transformation was to bring everybody out of these silo mentalities, and I thought that was a remit coming down for the corporate management team at the highest level, and we started to get embedded within and throughout this Council, because here exactly we'll have a problem. If we're talking about going forward with this, we've got one section of the Council going forward with it and not the other.
Yeah, I suppose my comment in respect of that would be, there's two things we're aiming for. We're aiming to get the best outcomes for the public of Midlothian in terms of the services we provide, and we're aiming to do it in the most efficient way. And I think in terms of when we're reviewing any service area, it's incumbent upon us to look at areas of potential overlap or areas which are complementary to ensure we've done the full job and not simply an in-service solution.
Yeah, but we're sitting here and there's elected members asking questions, for example, about no putting the silo, the waste bins at the start of the walkway, put them halfway up. The reality is, the response should have been back to the councillor was, that's no my remit, that's landscape's remit, because it's landscape that do that. And we'll have to find a way of getting out of this absolute silo mentality. It's just no working well. The recommendations in here, Phil, I think go quite a long way to what elected members are looking for, and this committee asked for this report for, to see about getting additional dog fouling bins and that, and getting better use of resources. You know, when you talk about the red bins and that we have on the walkways, and now you go up, you stick one bag in it, if it's sticking out, folk think it's full, so they'll no touch it. I think nearly everything should go to the new bins that you talked about, the multi-use bins, because they're, number one, a lot bigger, a lot easier to empty for the staff, and you didn't have that problem. You can quite clearly see by pulling the lever whether or no they're empty or full. And in that aspect, but what we can't have is a point system for one half of the council to be able to get a dog bin or a waste bin put in, or a multi-use bin for that one-to-one, and then the other group in to go forward with that. How would you suggest, because I don't think it's for Phil to take away here and say, well, I'll have a look at whether I'm going to take on landscaping's work. How do we then take forward a look to see that we are all working together and no holding this up? Because I think the public, one of the big things we get back to the public is dog fouling and litter and waste. And this is a good shot at actually getting that right. And it's about how do we now incorporate the rest of it in there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not suggesting it's Phil's responsibility to take another service. I'm saying that in all review work, the expectation is that we need to get the right people involved, be they within that service, within another service, to ensure that we're covering the full range of service which should be considered. And I think that we've got a number of examples which have come forward over to committee over over the months. I think of some in where housing and revenues and property, the need to coordinate across different service areas. So there's absolutely the fact that we can do that. And I think it's important that where we see pieces of work coming forward which don't seem to have looked beyond these immediate narrow areas, that we consider how we can do that better and look at it more broadly. And I think that without commenting in detail on this particular area of work, but the point that's been raised by members, I do think we need to look at if there's more we can do and to apply this either more widely or certainly to bring the two areas of service together and see if there's efficiencies and better service we can achieve by doing that.
Jim?
I think, actually, not just now, but I think we do need to look at this particular piece of work, because I think it serves as a good example. We talk a good game in terms of working together and getting away from the silo mentalities that Brian and Derek are mentioning. But in practice, there are examples where we haven't done it, and I think we should actually, as a performance committee, be asking for this to be looked at as to why we were in a situation where we've asked for a review here and a glaring opportunity to knock down the silo mentalities and to look at it in the bigger picture and not just in one particular area has been totally missed. So, I think we should get a report back on why this hasn't looked at the wider issue, because it would help us to understand maybe where, as a corporate body, we've got a problem in terms of us making policy in here and senior officers espousing that policy and talking about that policy, but it not actually getting down to where it needs to get down to.
Okay, with that, could we then, and firstly we'll look at the recommendations on the paper. I think, Phil, you're aware that there are some concerns with MPs, councillors or that, and what damage that could be, and how that could be abused, because we didn't want the person that can jump from person to person to person just to get the ban, or we campaigns to get the points, as we've seen in some other areas where it's a points-led system and everybody moves to get the points, and we didn't actually end up resolving the problem. So, I mean, I think we're initially welcoming your suggestion, but we'd ask you maybe to reconsider that part of it. I think we're quite happy with the fact that we're now going to look at more multi-use bins, dog bins, waste bins, and quite a considerable amount more. And I think we welcome that part of it, the frequencies and that, and the way that you're dealing with that. Again, I think it's going to be a dramatic increase in the service. When you move to the recommendations on page 48, unfortunately we didn't have the authority. I think all we can recommend to Council is that we note the agreed changes, approve the budget £60,000 for additional bins within the General Services Capital Plan for 14-15. And I think we should ask for a further report to come back on how we can incorporate where we can widen. If we've talked about road gullies, we've talked about road sweeping, we've talked about dog fouling, we've talked about just generally emptying bins. It's about asking for a report back on number one on dog fouling. Kevin's telling us that the targets are sorry, the successes are going up the way. I think we should ask for a report back on, how many folk have we got that are now targeting, because we give a lot of landscape officers and other officers the power to issue the tickets. We should be asking for a fully detailed report back on, where have we went for, say, 2010 to now, or however long back you want to go to now, because it did have massive peaks and drops. So we can get that, and we can get an idea of how many staff we have fighting what seems to be one of the highest concerns that the public have with us. And every time we go to a questionnaire, dog fouling, litter and waste amount in there, and certainly has been since 1999, since I joined the council. Whenever you looked at one of these questionnaires, it was always in the top 10. So if we could ask for that to come back, we could also ask that a report comes back on the possibility of cross working or taking out the silo mentalities and bringing together the party that landscape plays within this, and the budgets that would need to be transferred with that to sort of bring all that together, and perhaps we could even, and I'm not sure if gully cleaning and that could come out road services, but perhaps even if we can get a, if it can't, here's the reason it can't. But let's have a look at, because these are the areas that all sort of automatically look together, and it's the same with the dog fouling. To me, this whole area should be in the one bit, or it's, if there's good reason, and there might well be that can't, or there's other responsibilities that they want to keep them where they are, then I think we should be looking at that. And if we ask for a report back on, what, 2 cycles, that gain 12 weeks, would that be adequate, do you think, Kenneth, John?
I would look to be doing it after the summer recess. That would be, given things that are going on, the first committee, proper committee after the summer recess, I would suggest, Chair, but very much I'm in committee's hands.
Not quite happy. We want to bring it back in a realistic time and not put too much pressure for that, for a rush out. Jim?
I'm quite happy with everything you suggested there, Chair. But as regards to the work in the asylum mentality, what you're suggesting there is a report to come back to resolve this particular issue that we're discussing here today. I think there's, even for the Chief Executive's perspective, I think he needs to look at why that didn't automatically happen. Now, as you said, there may be good reason for it. It may be that it was just passed by because there's a practical issue there that we're not aware of. But I think we need to look, use this as an example, look as to why this hasn't come back here with a joint approach as a matter of course. That was the point I was trying to make earlier.
Okay. So that would be an additional report on generally how the Council is addressing working together and coming away for the old-fashioned asylum mentalities, and should that be incorporated into every report that's asked for? Should that first be looked at? Is there a way they can work together? Are members happy with that? Okay, as I say, I think it's like everything. It's, you only hear the negatives first, but in this report, which is a good report, you can clearly see there's more dog bans, more litter bans. We're going to target the areas most in need, which is good. Our town centres will have dedicated staff. Schools, and as close to schools, will have support. We're going to work well with schools and that, and I think we should congratulate Phil for bringing forward the report. I'm sorry, Phil, that you sit there and all you hear is the negatives. It's the bits that haven't been, or we didn't think that have been picked up right. But I think that the benefits far outweigh what is the since you got rid of that purple car, you're doing really well. Okay, so can we agree with the report and wait for the report, further reports coming forward after the summer recess? Okay, thank you. Council House Building Programme phases 1 and 2. I had hoped that this would have been a more sort of detailed report on, you know, just touching on what we had done in the background. And this here just sort of touches on where we are. It's more a where are we report rather than a report I thought we were going to be looking at. But however, that's maybe just down to not being as clear as we want to have been. What we'll do is we'll let Gary take us through, or Kevin take us through where we are with this report now, or John, whichever one it is. It's Kevin. We'll get Kevin to take us through this, and then we can have some further discussion on it.
Thank you, Chair. This paper is in terms of the request from committee on the 5th of March, and the purpose is to provide an update on the progress made on the Council Housing Building Programme over Phase 1 and 2. In reflection of the fact that this is a joint report and it is a joint effort corporately across the Council to deliver on the house building programme, my colleague Gary Sherritt will also speak to part of this report in terms of the construction and design. Disappointed if this report doesn't meet the remit, but essentially I understood in terms of the background at 2.1 with the criteria that was requested that we had addressed those, but again, if there's further information, we're happy to bring that forward in due course. In terms of housing supply, this is defined in 3.1. At Table 1, this shows that 1,347 new affordable houses have been completed in Midlothian since 2006 and is defined in the Table 1 across the period 2006 to 2014. Also indicated across the settlement areas across Midlothian itself, and there's a combination of both the council and the registered social landlords completed units defined there, which make up the number of 1,347. In terms of the other issue which was requested in terms of the commitment for additional house developments and initiatives that are being undertaken to increase the supply of affordable housing, these are defined in terms of the respective bullet points that follow on. There's increased allocated grant funding to Midlothian from the Scottish Government, which has increased the minimum level of grant funding for investment over 2016 to 19 following the local housing strategy and the submission of the Strategic Housing Investment Plan back in last year. That has also resulted in an increased subsidy to the registered social landlords in the area. However, as is indicated in the second bullet point, there is still a major challenge in increasing the investment for affordable housing for housing associations in terms of their borrowing requirements and their borrowing rates. And in recognition of that and the relatively stable position that the Council has in terms of its financial position for house building purposes and the prudential borrowing, the Council had requested and had subsequently received from Scottish ministers approval to act as a lender for on-lending to local housing associations. We have had proposals scoped out and confirmed in terms of an available scheme to do that, and that awaits anticipation of that request to that funding facility for suitable projects that are being identified by local housing associations. In addition to this, for further initiatives, the Council has, on each occasion of the launch of the National Housing Trust model, submitted the bidding process. Whilst private sector developers have made submissions, they have subsequently later withdrawn their interest in progressing those beyond to the tender stage. The Council has also promoted low-cost home ownership schemes in the area over the period 2013-14, and we make that awareness to all the housing list applicants about low-cost home ownership in terms of affordability and known income ranges within those housing applicants to the Council. Within the past month, we've launched the Empty Homes Loan Fund. This has been established to assist empty home owners bring their properties back into use on a leasing basis for tenants, with a mid-market rent over a 5-year period, and we're estimating in the pilot that 10 properties could be brought back into use over the current financial year. In terms of housing demand was another criteria that was requested. In Table 2, we detail the current housing list. This follows the revision of the allocation policy that members will be aware of since last April, and we're in the process of revising the outcomes to ensure that that has delivered on precisely what was required of the revised housing allocation policy. The table indicates, in terms of bedroom size, the position at April 2014, and you'll note that over 58% of applicants are requiring one-bed property. This certainly reflects the position in terms of the under-occupancy charge relative to welfare reform for housing benefit claimants, which was introduced in April of 2013. Consequently, it was agreed in Phase 2 of the new social housing programme that we would alter the mix from the Phase 1 programme. That had focused on larger families waiting on the transfer list, and the preferred mix for Phase 2 is shown as defined in Table 3. We have a target of 44% of one-bedroom housing to take account of both demographic change and the implications of welfare reform. And in terms of one-bedroom units, 52 out of the 172 that are detailed there are proposed to be one-bedroom, one-person units, suitable for single people, being either a studio-type flat or a one-bedroom type flat. This is to ensure that, in order to ensure sustainable communities, it's recommended that we do not increase the percentage beyond the 44% that's indicated there in terms of balanced communities and housing management issues. That takes us on to the construction and design aspects of housing Phase 1 from 3.3 onwards, and my colleague Gary Sherritt will pick up the remainder of the report.
Thanks, Gavin. In terms of the progress made to date in Phase 1, we've now completed the programme there with an additional 864 units completed in that phase. Most of those sites are through their defects liability, but 4 of the sites remain within that period. On phase 2, we have completed 2 sites of 76 units, and they're now in their defects liability period also. The framework contracting framework that we require for the second phase, following on from the first 2 sites. First 2 sites were completed because we used the benefit of the tail end of the last tendering process. That expired, and we therefore had to go back out to the market. So we went through the pre-qualification route through OJU, and eventually created a tender list which resulted in 3 different lots. As you recall, we were asked by Council to include small and medium enterprise opportunities there. So we looked at small, medium and large sites, so looked at capability range of contractors and who was suitable to tender for that. During that consultation period and framework tendering period, we obtained planning consent for 3 sites, and given that the framework has just completed after having had various extensions due to submissions from the contractors asking for the extensions, mainly on technical grounds and capacity grounds, to ensure that we got best value out of the process. That was concluded at the end of February. It's been assessed, and we will be awarding to the framework during May. The planning consents I've just referred to give us a faster start on site as a result of that, so we don't have to wait on that. And the intention is to complete the framework exercise where we've still got a standstill period for any challenge, and then appoint the contractors from that framework to the specific contracts for each of the 3 sites with planning consent. We have a further 3 sites which have gone through the tender process with a design element to them, and the contractors have put forward their submissions, including a design for the next 3 sites. So again, that will speed up the process once we get the framework concluded, to allow us to get on site as soon as possible. The tender evaluations comprise quality and price, as is noted in the report. As I say, the tender report is due now, and it will go through that standstill period before we can announce that back to Cabinet. The construction delivery programme is set out in 355 on page F5, indicates that we should be commencing on site in June for the first 3 sites, as I've said, and then following on to the next 3 sites with the benefit of the design work that's already completed. Through the process, we've also created generic property types. Now, when I say generic, it's the design principles and the shape of the properties. They can change in elevational treatments and internal fenestration and layouts and the likes, but the principles are established. That will benefit again in terms of the speed of delivery from here on in. The mix and the styles of houses has been done in conjunction with Kevin's team, and hopefully when we put these designs to the housing team, there's no surprises, and that's the whole principle of that cooperative approach that we've taken. Other areas where we're exploring through the same process are Houses for Heroes, which has been an approach through ex-service personnel to identify possibilities of locating a site for them, mainly in the Pennycook area, near their barracks up there. Complex care unit at Eastfield Farm Road in Pennycook, we're looking at feasibility for that, at the same time as delivering the Phase 2 housing projects. The overall programme is set out in the Appendix A. The notes that you see at the bottom of that in Appendix A are actually for the contractors, so we're not giving them anything hard and fast. There's obviously a caveat there that we can change that and fluctuate that as we require. Given this is a public meeting, obviously I've not included any figures in here, but the value for money that we've got out of the process, where we, through the framework process, we've got bills of quantities for each of the house styles, that's coming back in around the same figures that we achieved at the tail end of Phase 2. So we have actually achieved what we were aiming to achieve from the marketplace, given that there's now a rising market and we're seeing price increases coming through. Any questions from that?
Thanks, Gary. Questions, Brian?
The Empty Homes Loan Fund. You answered some of the questions when you were explaining it, but just like it explained a bit further, you know, you're talking about a pilot project. You know, you're talking about 10 properties. You know, there's nothing more frustrating for somebody on the waiting list to see empty houses sitting. You know, and a lot of them are in private ownership, and it's complicated. You know, it could be because of a break-up of a marriage. It could be because of health reasons. It could be because of work commitments. You know, that they've had to work away from home for a number of years, or whatever. But you know, seeing those homes sitting there empty is very, very frustrating, and I have that in my ward as well. You know, you know, people are desperate to get a house, you know, and it's just sitting there. Some of these houses are habitable, you know, straight away. You know, they might not be responding to any mail when we send it to them, you know, or not be. And I don't know about the eligibility of the council tax, but how does this rent situation then work? You know, and what's the criteria for selecting these, and what's the sort of cost figures? Because there's no figures in here about how much can get loaned. But if an individual's not needing much of a loan to bring it up to habitable standards, is the marketing costs, you know, part of the loan for actually publicising it's available for rent, and is it that paid back to us via the rent? So are we getting our guaranteed money back from it? So obviously first, and any financial arrangements for that. And so what is the criteria if there was more than 10 offered, you know, up for rent? What's the selection criteria for that? And the basis, is it just a pilot project? And is the pilot project for 5 years? You know, or is this going to be reviewed, you know, as demand increases?
Thank you. Certainly the Empty Homes Loan Fund was launched last month. The criteria are that the property should be or should have been empty for at least a 6-month period. As you indicate, there are connections in terms of council tax liability for that period of time. We've certainly canvassed through the available information we have from revenues of empty properties and the known owners of those properties to make them aware of this scheme now being available. Similarly, as you've indicated, Councillor Pottinger, there's a whole host of reasons that we have discovered that some properties are empty and some people have a preference that they will remain empty. This is just an incentive, as you say, to bring forward those properties into use again. The scheme itself runs for 5 years because that is the payback period for the loan that we anticipate on an average basis, which can be anything up to £125,000. The 5-year leased rental period is to ensure over the life of the scheme and the number of units that may be eligible that we do have that payback. The investment in the project management also is being carried out by Dunedin Canmore in conjunction with ourselves as the managing agent for the project. Certainly we anticipated 20 properties might be a prospect for us. We are having difficulty in having responses to even 10 from the marketing that we've done to date. But this, as I say, will run for at least a 12-month period. That's the purpose of the pilot, to see what the response generally is. And then that feedback goes back to Scottish Government, who are funding this, underwriting this, as to whether it gets extended or is done in a different way. Because it's on a loan basis, there are discussions going on offline in terms of whether a grant would be a more feasible opportunity, where clearly it's money that's being provided and there isn't the requirement to pay back. So even from the early stages of the loan scheme itself, not in Midlothian but elsewhere across the country, the feedback in those terms is currently being fed back to Scottish Government. So it's a 5-year period for the payback. There are managing agents locally in terms of Dunedin Canmore who are working with us on environmental health relative to the habitable standard of a property. And again, as you say, that ranges from properties that are currently available for use but sitting empty all the way through to those that do need a whole host of range of works to bring them up to the tolerable standard.
Alec. Thanks, Derek. It's really a question for Gary, because I don't want to get into the private landlords, empty houses scenario. We'll be here all day. It's maybe a separate issue. But Gary, you've got in 3.5.5, the construction delivery programme. How realistic are your vision there that we should be starting construction and the buildings in Pennycook, which have got planning permission on June this year?
Throughout the process, I mean, that was part of the delays. We had to make sure that the contractors were aware of our intentions in terms of start dates and completion dates and their ability to resource that and indeed complete that. So the two contractors that we're coming back to have indicated that they can do that. What we've done through the process is obviously obtain planning consent. We've been completing the building warrant for the house types that we've got. So again, we've stolen a march on that side of things. We still have the RCC to complete in these three sites, but we're well advanced. So the intention is, and we're committing the contractors once we've signed over to them, that they do start in the June.
Adam?
Thanks. Just a couple of points. Still disappointed that the three sites in Penicuik, the design of them, everybody was quite happy with the council houses coming forward. I'm pleased to see that things are actually moving in that direction again. But the three-storey design in particular attracted over 100 objections, and this council completely ignored the views of the local people in the three sites. Anyway, we are where we are with that. But can I ask, in terms of the houses for heroes, I'm getting kind of mixed messages on this. I mean, there was inquiries from the residents up in the Kirkhill Road area regarding this, and I think they went to the Community Council. I wasn't there, but I'm understanding was they were at the Community Council. And certainly the advice I got back from planning was that they were looking at this site for homes for heroes, or houses for heroes. But I mean, with the look at this, I mean, that's not been decided yet. I mean, what's actually happening with the houses for heroes, and particularly in relation to the two sites at Edinburgh Road, which is all Pentland House, the Pentland Care Home. It's quite a controversial site at the moment. I mean, Joe's been involved in some of the stuff that you'll had some objections to it and various things. So what's happening with that? Because I think folk would want to know, and also, as I say, the Kirkhill Road site, because it's, you know, it's a substantial bit of ground up there.
You're absolutely right. The decision hasn't been made yet in terms of what is happening with these sites. We've been looking at various options for them, trying to put the design together, trying to be proactive as much as we can as a council. The land take that they're looking for goes around a village green style and whatnot. It takes up quite a bit of land. Yes, both of those sites are on our list for our development, and obviously we're concerned that the land take should be appropriate as opposed to considerable, and therefore we get less and less land for ourselves and our own social housing. But neither of the sites as yet has been handed over or indeed agreed that that's where the location for these units will be. Indeed, the Army have looked at some of their own land, and I think the land opposite the entrance to the barracks where the car parking is at the moment was considered as well. And we've looked at designs that could go into that area. So I think this is something that will continue to go on until there's a final decision made, not just by ourselves but by others.
Just to follow up to that as well, in terms of the uncertainty surrounding the referendum as well, I mean, if there is a yes vote and the barracks at Penicuik would be a British Army soldiers based in a foreign country, which they would be, and we would still be building homes for heroes in the land opposite, because it wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't have any locus in that, would they?
I wouldn't know the answer to that, to be honest.
Okay, any further questions? Any comments? Okay, can I just ask Gary to start with? On 3.4, Gary, we've got phase 2 of the council house building programme. When we consider the mass majority of houses we're now looking at aren't the 4 and 3 bedrooms, we're talking about studio flats, 1 bedroom flats, 2 bedrooms. We seem to be talking about 400 houses for a budget of £63.7 million. That really just doesn't balance up, does it? We're talking nearly £150,000 a house there. Are the figures wrong? Can you clarify that?
No, the figures in phase 2 include for some land costs as well, because obviously that's going between budgets within the council. But when we break it down after we take out, I mean, we've got ground conditions which are different in this phase than what we had in the last phase. When we take out the abnormal costs, as we would call them, then the value for money comes back to pretty much what we had at the tail end of the end of phase 2. Obviously, being a public meeting, I'm not going to
declare the figures today, but I'm more than happy to take that offline and show you that separately. But it's when you break out the additional costs that we have, they do come back to similar unit costs.
I'll still find it hard to understand, Gary, as to how we're talking about the equivalent. Unless my maths are wrong here, the 400 houses with 63,000 is an addition is £150,000 plus per unit. Just speaking to a layman, or sitting here as a layman, I think you'd be better just going to one of the house building sites and buying a pile of houses, because they would be cheaper. We see them advertised all over the place for less than that now. And certainly, if we're looking for studio flats, one-bedroom houses and flats, it just seems exceptionally expensive, irrespective of whether we're buying land or no, or we didn't have any additional needs. I wouldn't have thought. We're maybe better building higher standard houses than the private sector, but we, as the same as the house builders, are probably faced with the same ground conditions, ground purchases and that as everybody else. So it just really does seem that 400 houses for that type of money, I would have certainly expected about a further 25% in that.
You're right to pick up on some of the specification items. We've obviously got extra care houses in there, which is not a standard unit. So there are a few anomalies in there. It's approximately 400 houses is what we've said. If we can get more than that, obviously we will do so. The framework is only just being analysed at the moment. What I'm telling you is a highlight from that I'm seeing in terms of the value for money. That's what's been indicated back to me. When we've got the full analysis and we've got the full tender report coming back, then we'll see how many units that we can actually get out of the budget that we've got at our disposal.
Okay. On the types of houses we're building, Kevin, you can see the chart there where we've got 2,493 one bed and 1,319 two bed. So you've got 58% one bed applicants and 31% two bed and 3%, sorry, 9% three. So the reality is, I take it that we're really looking to concentrate in the one bed and two bed areas when we're building them, because you seem to indicate a cap on one bedroom premises at, I think, at 42%. Correct me if I'm wrong. Why would you place that cap if what we're saying is that although saying that the preferred housing mix is you've got at 44%, if the people on the waiting list are at 58%, why would you cap the amount of houses that you're building at that size at a lower stage?
Certainly, in terms of the demand is, as you indicate, depicted in the tables 2. As we're saying in table 3, the narrative there is that we have a target of 44% for one-bedroom properties and the 41% for two-bedroom properties. That certainly reflects, as we're saying, both the demographic in terms of the formation of single-person households in the area and the impact of welfare reform as it's been to date and projected to be. Once universal credit itself also is introduced, will be a further pressure there. So combined between one bedroom and two bedrooms, because we did amend the housing allocation policy to allow for single parents who didn't have the permanent care of their children to also be included onto the two-bedroom list. So we made the appropriate adjustment there. So essentially we have 85% of what's within the preferred housing mix to be for smaller person or smaller sized households within phase 2.
It'll be interesting to see as the sites come forward one by one as to where they are. The one thing I think that's absolutely crystal clear is that when you've got 4,200 people sitting on a waiting list, and we're looking to be bringing forward 400 or 500 houses, it's just the tip of the iceberg that we're getting. Have we been looking at any other ways in which we can develop houses? I mean, we've been round the house, around the area where the registered social landlords. They seem to have stopped building now for some reason or other. Certainly they didn't seem to be building. In the last couple of years, that seems to have all but dried up. You know, are there additional ways that we're giving consideration to try and get more houses, to attempt to get more people into permanent accommodation? I mean, have we looked at anything out of the box that we've not normally been doing, rather than just you put your name down and you get your points and you wait until you're there? We have numerous young people who are working, that are having to pay exceptional rents, and that you see their full of their wages draining away on private rents and stuff like that. Is there anything at all we're doing to try and assist the youngsters who are in work, or young couples who are in work that can't get mortgages? Is there anything in these areas that we're looking to do in here? Is there anything out the box that, and forget other councils, because other councils and the government tell us that we were wrong to start building council houses, we now know that they've accepted it was them. Is there anything that we're doing that we should be looking at to try to help in these areas?
Certainly, we're always looking at every opportunity that there is to provide and maximise affordable rented housing in Midlothian, and that's certainly what we've depicted in terms of 3.1 in the report against the range of existing schemes and measures that they are. Certainly, in terms of additional allocation to us from Scottish Government, we've certainly been working on the premise of new build, both for ourselves and RSLs, but it's not, in terms of recent discussions that we've been having, restricted to that. So, in a roundabout way, I'm trying to answer that again without getting into the specifics, because there's no commitment yet as to other schemes that we've looked at and have maximised before in the past, in terms of what may be currently available in the market. So there are ongoing discussions in terms of making use of the available funding, rather than, and not exclusively, for new build properties themselves. Equally, in terms of other schemes like Help to Buy, particularly in terms of your point on mortgage availability, clearly in terms of the market in the past week, that is being restricted in terms of eligibility, but we're trying to maximise those opportunities. And again, in terms of the Armed Forces Covenant, the particular arrangements that there are available to those in being discharged from the forces. There's also the on-lending, as I say, in terms of the RSLs, which is something that's quite innovative. There's only 2 other councils in the position that are doing that. So we are looking at every prospect, as I say, and things which are not particularly conventional, to maximise affordable housing in Midlothian, and will continue to do that.
Okay. I'm not sure whether when we went just after the May election, we went in to visit a development in Edinburgh, where effectively it was a mixture of rented and sold properties, and the money that was made for the sold properties. Firstly, the sold properties were directed at people who were on the waiting list in that area. That there was a rental for a period of time, there was an option to rent for so long and then to buy. Are we looking at any areas like that to assist us? Because the money that they were making was quite simply being reinvested into bringing more properties or buying more properties. Are we looking at any areas such as that, where effectively we can help some of the young people to get onto the homeowner list, whether it's stuff we are building, that we could work with banks or finances, or as a council that can borrow, you know, to build stuff, to supply, to sell on to folk that are on our list at a reasonable price, at an affordable price, to help get them off the waiting list and give them some security when they're in there. You know, you read a lot about you go for a mortgage to rent scheme when you're in trouble. Is there a way we could implement that? However, reverse that when they got a job, for example. You know, is there any schemes like that we're looking at all? I know that there will maybe be difficulties in there, but the reality here is that no matter how hard we're trying, you're going to be left with an excess of 3,500 people, 3,500 families still on a waiting list for Midlothian Council, and I think it was Gary that says house prices have started going up again, so there's going to be a heck of a lot of them who are going to find them unaffordable.
Certainly, in terms of the immediate response, what I would caution you in terms of the waiting list numbers is that we now have a combined common housing register with Melville Housing Association. So it's demand within Midlothian which better reflects that, but whereas previously in terms of numbers that we have reported to Cabinet and Council, it was purely Midlothian Council's waiting list. This, because it's now a common housing register, is us and Melville Housing Association. So it was just to give you that health warning in terms of those particular numbers. They do reflect actual demand, but it's now a combined demand with us and Melville. Yes, we're looking at the opportunities we have in terms of mid-market rent, and I know that Gary wants to pick up on that particular point.
Thanks, Gavin. We have met with several financial institutions who have made approaches, and they have big funds available. They have various models in which they are willing to invest a lot of their capital into provision for social housing. At this point in time, the wide criteria which they apply makes it very hard to compare apples with apples. So we had a cross-service meeting about 2 weeks ago where we discussed how we would approach that. And at this point in time, the Head of Finance is looking at producing a brief which we would then issue to the market to make sure that we do get an apples-for-apples comparison when we're looking at what investment could we attract. And I think it's the attraction is the fact that we've got a high demand, obviously, in terms of the waiting list, and we're a stable covenant for them, so that's the attraction. But I think just to make sure we're getting best value out of that, and indeed maximising the available funds that are out there, we need to put that brief together before we issue it. But it's one of the options that we're definitely exploring just now.
Do we think that's going to do anything for the mid-market rent? We talk about it. Can somebody mind me? I think it's in the £565 a month area for a two-bedroom flat. I didn't ken enough a lot of young couples that are earning the kind of money that they can afford to pay that as a rental, and then on top of that the rest of the bills, because that mid-market rent gets pushed up with the Edinburgh market being right on our doorstep, so it's been pushed to an area where it is absolutely, it starts to get to the limit where it's affordable to most people and absolutely not affordable to an awful lot of people. And I think it's these areas we need to be trying to address how we're going to deal with that. You know, we've done a quick exercise looking at a property costing us about £80,000 to build. If we could get a rental back on that, quite a low rental back on that, or a mortgage back on that to reinvest in further houses, it would allow us to start addressing a lot better and be able to build an awful lot more houses. And it's whether or not there are areas such as that that we can do. And one of the noticeable things for me was when we went on that visit, that I think it was Dunedin Canmore, I can't quite remember which group it was, but they say that the wee studio flats were absolutely snapped up. They were the stuff that absolutely went first. And you're finding a lot of, I certainly getting a lot of feedback from young people that they're looking for something small, compact, no got big heating bills, no got big lighting bills, and no that expensive, because they want to keep working. And I mean, are we looking outside the box just on our own to sort of see is there anything we can do? Because I think whenever you go to any of the finance companies, they're looking for a major return in excess of 5%. And it's really as simple as that. That's what they're in business for. We're here to try and resolve a problem and to get as many houses as we can build out of the money that we can get.
You're answering an awful lot of the queries that we're having to put back to them. Or sorry, you're asking me to put those back to the financial institutions, and that is exactly a reflection of what we have been asking, particularly around the rental values that they are expecting, and indeed we could even think about charging in Midlothian. I mean, that's more Kevin's bag than my bag. But in terms of the product itself, yes, the modern techniques of reducing the bills of the tenants has definitely been explored. We're looking at properties where you need a minimal of heating, opportunities where they're almost air and water tight. You just can't get fluctuating temperatures as a result of that. So system build, which is
a throwback to an old way of building, but it's now been modernised and it's now better described as factory built. So you're getting panel built properties which are airtight and sealed and self-constructed before they come onto site. These are new techniques that are being looked at the moment, and indeed asking these financial interested parties to come forward with the expertise to deliver that as well. So it's not just the financial institutions, but it's also developers, contractors in a consortium that we're talking to.
I don't think it stops me worrying about the concern that we have that the developers consortiums are looking for profits, and it's you know, when you run, for example, a mortgage through the Royal Bank of Scotland online, if you're looking for something in the region of £80,000, they pay back monthly to that under £400 over a period of time at a rent of like £350 to £400 a month. You're getting that back plus, and that would allow us to build unlimited amounts of them if we're allowed to do these sort of things. But I don't think unless we look at it, and I'm not saying that's the route we would take, I think we need to be looking at something and say, well, you know, how are we going to resolve this problem? And that you're no faced with, because if you're telling a young person, I would have thought we could have built, Gary, for £550 a month, we could build a two-bedroom flat as a mortgage reasonably. We would sit quite comfortably in that over the lifetime of a mortgage. Are we looking at any of this stuff, or is this stuff that we're not comfortable with?
In terms of the financial models, I think that brief is just where we are just now. We're starting to pull that together. And I think your suggestions there, I'll feed back that to the Head of Finance when he's pulling that together.
Questions or comments before we...
Chair, I would have thought that we could have discussed this in a lot more detail. I'm just wondering if it would be worth having some kind of working group to look at this, a subgroup of the performance, because I'd certainly like to know more about some of the schemes and maybe explore some of the ideas that Derek's talking about as to whether we could maybe go and do something kind of innovative in the, in this area to try and assist people. I think it's quite ironic when we look at the report that we've had back here today in terms of the numbers. When we first started talking about this back in mid-2000s, the early 2000s, we were talking about the size of the problem being 1,800. We were short of 1,800 properties, if my memory serves me right. And it actually happens to be the case that come the end of this next batch, between us and the social landlords, which we included in the solution, if you like, when we were looking for the 1,800 houses, we will have built that. Unfortunately, time moves on and the demand has more than doubled over that period. So we are where we are, but it is quite... I suppose it's good in a way that we've managed to achieve what we set. We will probably manage to achieve what we set out to achieve at the beginning in terms of the numbers that we were looking to, with supplemented with the registered landlords. One thing, the quick question. Kevin, you were talking about the combined lists, and we've got to bear in mind now that it's a combined list. Has that really changed that much in terms of the overall demand? Because I would guess that the vast majority of people I come into contact with, if they're on the council list, they're also on Melville. So has it really made that much a difference in that respect? And I take it there isn't a double count. And I take it when we talk about the combined list now, that is the situation that we've now got in Midlothian as a whole.
Sure. As you say, it's not made that significant change. Prior to the review, after last April's new allocation policy, we reviewed all our applications. We were sitting over 6,000 ourselves at that point. This, as I say, is the combined numbers with us and Melville at just over 4,200 now. But yes, invariably, in the majority of cases, people had applied to us as well as Melville in any event.
Yeah.
Thanks, Derek. Just to clarify that, these 4,242, if somebody's on a waiting list for a house in Dalkeith and also for one in Gorebridge, they count as one, I take it. And secondly, that if there's a whole family who are on the waiting list, it would again be a single applicant.
It's based on applications, which can be a single-person household or a household of any other number, yes. So it's number of applicants. Yeah.
Okay. as you can see, and I think Jim makes the point rightly, there was 1,800 people on the waiting list, and between us and RSLs, we've excelled actually what we're looking at. We're looking at 1,000 houses, and there's 1,347 being built. The reality is, because that was mainly transfer-led, it should have absolutely wiped out the waiting list and we should have nobody. But the reality is with the downturn, we now have an additional 4,000 people, and 4,000 families or single people waiting on a house. And I think we'll have to start looking at different ways to see how we can help with that. I think we really need to keep in mind that as a council, in the very turn of 2000, we started looking at this. This was led and pushed. It was politically led and pushed as well. Indeed, several senior officers in here didn't think it was a good idea to go forward. And indeed, the Scottish Parliament at that time, I think, should be a COSLA, gave us a slap telling us that RSLs were the best people to build houses at that time. However, as I say, I think they've now accepted that they were wrong and we were right. As you can see from the report, we have certainly built more houses. I can't remember, I think it was Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen, and we've built twice what they have over the last decade, which I think speaks volumes for itself as to where this council was. It led the way, and it should continue to lead the way. Jim suggested that a short-life working group be formed. I think that would be a good idea to look at ways in which we could work with that. Could I suggest that we maybe bring the remit of that back to the next Performance Review and Scrutiny Committee? And I think it would be helpful, rather than it just being ourselves that's on it. I think it would be a good idea and a productive idea to ask a member of the Cabinet to be appointed, either finance or the housing member, but leave it to the Cabinet to appoint a member if they wanted to sit in this. So could I ask maybe the officers to bring back a scoping of what would be in the scope of this? And I really think we're looking for something short and sweet. We're not looking for something to run over a year. We're looking for a sort of a 4-month sort of piece of work to be done to look to see, well, is there any new ways? Because we do have a group of people out there who will now, on a point system, in the very near future, get a house first. We've got a group of people out there, young couples, young single people, who are in jobs that are being faced with either having to pay an extortionate rents or having to sleep in bed and breakfast or with relatives and stuff like that. And I think there must be ways that this council should be able to help the people. And I think it's really important that we look at that. And we also have to make sure that we're also looking to see that the house build that we actually get here reflects and we're getting best value for it. Is everybody all right with that? Okay. Thank you for your attendance.